Hey everyone. Can't believe it's already week 4 of my chain challenge, but on this front of recording videos, I'm having much better progress than on the other chain challenge that I'm trying to do of installing a composting bin in the engineering department of Cambridge University. But I'll talk more about that later on in another part of my blog. As far as today's video is concerned, we're going to talk about climate change and climate change in general. I was reading a book online, and the title of the book was called Organized Climate Change Denial. So basically, what they were talking about was how different industries and scientists are coming together. Basically, they were saying how the private industry is funding, especially the fossil fuel industry, is funding research to counteract climate change, to say that climate change is a lie, and how it's going now from economic to socio-political and other debates. So, for example, climate change has a big presence now in the political agenda, as well as a claim to fame. So when you come out as a denier, people usually say, "Oh, look at this guy, he's a denier," and it's kind of like you have a celebrity status. So that's what climate change has come up to right now, from scientists being funded by private companies, fossil fuel companies, etc., to becoming an agenda in the political referendum, as well as a claim to fame. Now, this book was kind of interesting, and it brought around several key concepts. For example, the different deniers and how they said climate change was a lie. Now, as far as deniers are concerned, if you guys don't really know what who deniers is basically the camp of scientists who say that climate change is a lie, that, or I should say, that anthropogenic effects on climate change, so the effects that are caused by men, do not amount to much. That climate change is basically a natural phenomena, and it has happened in the past, and it's just following a cycle right now. So that is the deniers camp, and the deniers camp, for some reason or luckily, constitute of only 2.5% of all climate change scientists. So all of the scientists that are currently working on the issue of climate change and how it's working out, only 2.5% of those scientists are a part of the deniers camp. So that's not much, but whatever they are, whatever percentage they are, they for sure create a lot of media when they do come out with any sort of results. So, for example, in 2009, when ClimateGate happened, ClimateGate was basically a phenomenon when a lot of emails and messages were released from the climate change camp, and it basically said, "Oh, a lot of the data, a lot of the statistical data that were used in the fourth IPCC report was a lie. A lot of data were misjudged, they were manipulated, things like that." So that was climate change. So whatever happens whenever any sort of climate change agenda comes up, and if the deniers can jump on it, it creates a lot of media attention. And that's again going back to the celebrity status that this book was talking about on organized climate change denial. So some of the most famous deniers include, for example, the famous atmospheric physicist Richard Lindzen from the USA, and one of his main points is, oh well, CO2 emissions that are emitted by fossil fuel burning from man contribute only 1 part to 10,000 in atmospheric CO2 levels. In contrast to that, when a volcano blows up, CO2 released by volcano, or greenhouse gases released by volcanoes, are almost 2 to 3 times as much as what human beings produce by burning fossil fuels. Now, if you have any sort of a machine that can do any research whatsoever, for example, a computer, and you just type in how much CO2 has been emitted by human beings in the last 10, 20 years, you will find very good values from well-referenced sources. So, for example, the EIA, which is the Energy Information Association of the USA, the EIA is a government-funded organization which looks at how much CO2 has been emitted in the past 1 year, and you can go back several decades. So if I go back to 1991, when we had the second largest volcanic eruption in the Philippines. So the second largest volcanic eruption was in Mount Pinatubo. Mount Pinatubo was erupted in 1991, and it was the second largest volcanic eruption of the 20th century. And Mount Pinatubo only emitted 42 million tons of carbon dioxide. 42 million tons. And these are values from the EIA website. Compared to that, in 1991, the human contribution to the emission of CO2 into the atmosphere was 23 billion tons. So when Richard Lindzen says, okay, we only emit 1 part of 10,000 of atmospheric CO2, and volcanoes contribute 2 to 3 times more than that, that's not really a fact. If you do your own research, you will see Richard Lindzen is incorrect. Some other climate change scientists, for example, Ian Plimer, has mentioned that, climate change has happened in the past. CO2 has increased in the past, and this has this is basically a cyclical phenomena. And this is what we're experiencing right now. So he takes examples from the Jurassic or the Triassic period when climate change happened, CO2 levels went up, and the Earth temperature went up, and eventually we went into an ice age and everything else. So he's saying it's cyclical, and humans have very little contribution to that. Well, the reason that happened in the Jurassic or the Triassic period, yes, it happened naturally. Yes, CO2 levels increased and there was no human phenomena. But now if you go into Antarctica and if you take a sample of ice, so if you bore about 200 meters deep and you take an ice cylinder and you sample the amount of CO2 that's there in the ice cylinder actually has or can show you true values of CO2. And from the industrial age, there has been about a 200 times increase in the amount of CO2 within the ice layers of Antarctica. Now that is man-made. That is, you can't say that is just a natural phenomena. Since the Industrial Revolution, it's increased by about 200 times, and that's a large increase, and that's anthropogenic. Now in the past, when this happened naturally, dinosaurs were wiped out completely. There were rapid shifts in the habitats and how the environment was, and the animals couldn't evolve fast enough. And that created mass extinction. Now when it's happening, and because it's more anthropogenic and not cyclical, this can create mass extinctions again. So when Ian Plimer, who is a renowned Australian professor who teaches in the University of Sydney, says, this is cyclical and it's bound to happen, it's not really true. If you look at the ice sheets, and the ice sheets give you valuable data, we have been contributing a lot as human beings to the amount of CO2 that's emitted into the atmosphere. So you have to take all these things into account as well. So the deniers have their own views, but then most of these deniers' views can be counteracted with actual hard evidence. Now, I'm not saying whether the deniers are correct or incorrect or whether the believers are right. What is happening is global warming is occurring. It is a fact. We are having climate change. Whether it is the fault of man or not, we don't have enough time to debate over that. Time is running out and we need to act. We need to come up with alternatives. We need to come up with alternative sources of energy. We need to reduce our consumption rate. We need to change our habits to make our lives more sustainable. So whether the deniers camp is correct and whether there is a logical schism occurring between the scientific community themselves, it doesn't really matter because we need to come up with a response. So with that, I'll end my video for this week. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you next week again.